The iron hissed as I pressed it slowly over the last wrinkle of my navy dress. It wasn't new, but it had held its shape well over the years. Clean lines, simple seams, a garment that didn't need to shout to be respected. I laid it over the back of the bedroom chair, careful not to crease it again, and moved to the small vanity I kept by the window. The light was soft this late in the day, a kind of filtered gold that made my skin look gentler than I remembered. I opened the compact. A touch of powder, a stroke of mascara, nothing more. I reached for the lipstick Muted Rose, the same one I wore at West Point graduation, long before anyone in this house had an opinion about what I looked like. The floorboards creaked in the hallway. Is that blush Sierra's voice carried before I saw her face? What's the occasion, Mom? You dressing up for bingo night? She leaned against the doorframe, barefoot, holding a mug with some frothy oat milk creation. Her hair was in a tight bun, perfect, as always, like her days were photo shoots waiting to happen. She tilted her head, clearly entertained. I said nothing, just capped the lipstick and placed it back in the tray. I mean, no offense, she added, but it's just a reunion. Do they even recognize each other at those things? Or do y'all wear name tags so no one has to admit how different everyone looks now? She sipped from her mug and waited. But I didn't offer her the satisfaction of a reaction. I reached into the drawer and took out a small black box, the kind that held meaning far greater than its size suggested. When I opened it, the ring gleamed faintly polished but aged. West Point class of '84. I slipped it on my right hand and smoothed my dress where it hung. Dev, she called out behind her. Your mom's getting glammed up for her big night out. Devin appeared a moment later, still in his work shirt sleeves. Rolled up, tie undone. He glanced at me, then at Sierra. His smile was smaller, more reflex than mockery. You look nice, Mom, he said. I met his eyes for a second. Thank you. He nodded awkward, now sensing something his wife didn't. But he didn't stay. He retreated with a sip of water and a muttered something about checking email. Sierra lingered a few seconds longer. Well, have fun. Don't let them keep you out too late. She quipped, her grin too wide, her tone too bright. Then she was gone. The room fell still again. I reached for my clutch, opened it just enough to check that the device was inside smooth matte black dormant until called. Then I sat by the window dress, ready shoes polished, waiting for the clock to catch up to the rest of me. Outside, the light began to shift, soft gold giving way to evening blue. I watched it quietly, letting the silence settle where words had once wanted to rise. I joined the Army when I was 19. My mother cried the night I left, not because she didn't support me, but because she knew I wouldn't come back the same. She was right. I didn't. There were no parades or yellow ribbons where I went. My path diverged early reconnaissance, then intelligence, then black classified postings where names didn't go on walls and accomplishments stayed buried in closed systems. I was good at it. Too good. Promotions came but without ceremony. Clearance replaced recognition. Silence became my second skin. By the time I turned 30, I'd briefed Joint Chiefs behind soundproofed doors. By 35, I'd seen files that would never reach public record. West Point had prepared me to lead, but the field taught me how to disappear. That's the part people like Sierra never understood. They think leadership wears a podium and a polished smile. They think recognition comes from applause. But some of us serve differently quietly in corridors where lights don't blink red and reports are shredded before the ink dries. I never told Devin much. It wasn't just about protocol. It was protection. Compartmentalization is a survival instinct, and mine had grown roots. When he was young, I'd come home between deployments with sand still in my boots and smiles rehearsed in front of mirrors. I attended every school recital I could, even when jet lag blurred my vision. He doesn't remember that part. He only remembers I left again. When his father died, I was halfway through an assignment I couldn't name. I watched the funeral through encrypted satellite feed alone in a temporary bunker near the Turkish border. They handed me a folded flag once I returned, but the memory had already hardened into something colder. I moved into their house a year ago after the stroke. Doctors said I needed monitoring, and Devin thought this was the solution, an upstairs room, a pill schedule, and my military career sealed away like an old photograph. He called it retirement. I called it observation, but they never asked. Not about the medals I never displayed. Not about the contacts who still check in. Not about the box in my drawer with the insignia worn thin from use. To them, I'm just Inez, the grandmother who folds laundry with corners too sharp and lines up spices like a quartermaster. They didn't notice when the coded envelope arrived 2 weeks ago, or when the secure device linked to the restricted server. They don't recognize the subtle flash of green that means authentication was successful. They don't understand what it means when I check the weather radar 3 times a day for airspace patterns. I waited until the house fell into its usual pre-evening lull, Sierra on a call in the kitchen, Devin locked in his office downstairs, Callie upstairs with her headphones on. I opened the clutch and powered the device. A short burst vibrated once against my palm. Then the words appeared, "Stand by. 6-minute window. Target extraction." Below it, a timestamp. 1942. EST. I closed the screen, slow and deliberate. In 6 minutes, my life inside this house of mockery and forgetfulness would fold back like a tarp peeled from a dormant engine. The dress still hung neatly on the chair. My heels waited near the door. The lipstick was capped, the ring adjusted. All the pieces were where they needed to be. And through the glass of the window, I could hear something approaching in the distance. Low, rhythmic, gaining speed. I had just set the brush down when I heard her voice again, too bright, too rehearsed. "Okay, so this is priceless," Sierra said from behind her phone. "Here's my Emil getting ready, like it's 1982. Shoulder pads and all." Her laughter came quickly, the kind that seeks agreement, before anyone has a chance to object. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. Her reflection was already behind mine, in the vanity mirror, arm extended, phone angled for the best view of my back. I could feel the lens crawling over me, capturing the curve of my shoulders, the slight tilt of my neck, the way I adjusted a pin in my hair with steady fingers. "Say hi to the internet, Inez," she chirped. Off to relive her glory days, one school cafeteria at a time. From downstairs, Devin called out, "She could show them all up, babe. You know my mom never does anything halfway." He said it like a compliment, but it came wrapped in the kind of chuckle that told me he wasn't defending me, just softening the blow. Sierra swung the camera toward the hallway, still streaming. "Dev says she's got that serious face on again. Honestly, it's kind of cute." I turned, then just enough to meet her eyes through the reflection. My voice was quiet. "Are you finished?" She hesitated, not because she was embarrassed, but because she didn't expect a response at all. "Oh, yeah, just goofing around. It's all love, Mom." I nodded and rose from the chair. The dress fell clean against my frame, the lines crisp. I picked up the clutch, heavy with its hidden weight, and walked past her toward the stairs. She followed me with her phone for a moment longer before flipping the camera to her own face and saying something about nostalgia and awkward reunions. Callie sat at the top of the staircase legs, tucked under her. A book open, but unread in her lap. Her eyes met mine as I passed. She didn't smile, didn't speak. Just watched. I reached the bottom and moved toward the front door. The time was close. From the kitchen, Devin looked up from his coffee, brows raised. "You heading out now?" "Yes." He gestured toward the coat rack, still trying for levity. "Sure you don't want to bring an umbrella? Heard old reunions can be stormy." I didn't answer. I stepped out onto the porch. The air had changed cooler with the faint static of something approaching. The wind nudged the flag on the neighbor's lawn. The street was still cars lined up in neat driveways, porch lights blinking to life in early evening sync. Behind me, the door remained open. Sierra's voice echoed faintly from inside, still laughing, still talking to people who couldn't see me clearly. Then, from somewhere just beyond the trees, I heard it, low, steady, and growing. A sound I hadn't heard in years but knew by heart. The first sign was the vibration in my chest, subtle, rhythmic, familiar. Not the thump of adrenaline or nerves, but something heavier, layered beneath the sounds of domestic life. It was the kind of vibration you learn to feel before you ever hear the noise it brings. I stepped off the porch just as the sound crested the treetops. The rotor blades came next. Their whine cut through the evening like a warning, a tremble in the air that scattered birds from the power lines and sent dry leaves spinning across the pavement. Porch lights flickered. A few neighbors opened doors, peering out with squinting eyes and half-formed questions. Sierra came up behind me, shielding her eyes with one hand, the other still holding her phone. "What the hell is that?" Devin stepped outside just as the first gust of downwash swept through the cul-de-sac, pulling at his shirt and knocking over a planter near the steps. Is that a helicopter?" The aircraft crested the tree line, matte black and unmarked. It hovered directly above the center of the cul-de-sac with surgical steadiness, then descended slowly, kicking up wind in furious waves. The sound was thunder in every direction. Window panes shook. Wind chimes tangled themselves into silence, and children ran to front doors as their parents stepped out behind them. Callie had pressed her face to the screen door, frozen. Her eyes were wide but unafraid. She didn't blink when I looked at her. The chopper landed precisely just past the curb where Devin usually parked his car. Its blade slowed but did not stop. A side panel opened with a sharp mechanical slide, and a single figure stepped out. Dress blues, boots that had seen places no map could fully explain. Colonel Ramsey Ellison. He crossed the lawn with measured steps, whined, pressing his uniform tight against his frame. People stared, but no one moved. He didn't acknowledge them. His eyes stayed locked on me. When he reached the foot of the driveway, he stopped, stood tall, and saluted. Crisp, exact, reverent. "Lieutenant General Calderon," he said, voice loud but steady against the wind. "Ma'am, we're cleared for immediate departure." Devin dropped his coffee mug. It shattered at his feet, splintering against the concrete like it had been made of glass-thin doubt. Sierra didn't move. Her phone, once held high and proud, now hung limp in her hand. Her mouth parted slightly like she was about to speak, but couldn't decide on the tone. The neighborhood had gone still. The kind of stillness that doesn't ask for silence, it demands it. A stillness that follows something unmistakable, irreversible. I walked down the steps without pause. Devin stepped back as I passed. Sierra turned slightly as if to call out, but no sound came. She just watched. When I reached the edge of the lawn, I paused. The wind still moved through the trees. Neighbors still watched from behind their fences. I didn't raise my voice. "I wasn't dressing up for your reunion," I said, clear enough for them to hear. "I was getting ready to serve." I didn't wait for a response. I didn't expect one. Colonel Ellison turned with me, falling into step as we approached the aircraft. He held out a gloved hand, steadying me as I climbed aboard. The door closed behind us with a hiss of pressurized air, sealing the noise outside. Inside, the cabin was cool and controlled. The vibration remained, but it no longer felt disruptive. It felt like focus, like mission. Ellison handed me a secured tablet, already unlocked and glowing. "Your clearance is live. You're patched into command." I scanned the first page of the data dump. Breach vectors. IP shadows. Domestic routers flagged for packet duplication. The trail was familiar, and it led straight through civilian systems. The cover they'd used wasn't government. It was influencer traffic, bounced through local uplinks, camouflaged by hashtags and algorithm loops. One of the flagged clusters had been pinging from a residential IP registered to our very street. I recognized the pattern. I recognized the risk. Ellison watched me process. We're estimating 7 hours before full trace. Cyber is moving, but they want your read before midnight. Understood, I said already, tapping through headers. Below us, the town receded into small blocks and intersections, each one predictable, each one unaware. I took one last look out the window as we turned east toward the secure site. Devon was still standing on the porch. Sierra had stepped back inside, and Callie, still at the screen door, raised her hand in a small, quiet wave. I nodded once more to myself, then to her, and turned back to the screen. The mission parameters had loaded. The time for reflection was done. By the time we reached the command base, the clip had already gone viral. Ellison handed me a second device mid-briefing. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "you should see this." On the screen was Sierra's stream, edited, re-uploaded, now clipped into 15-second loops with captions like "Mill turned General" and "Suburb shock helicopter pickup at house party." The original post was still live, thousands of comments deep, mostly confusion, some awe, and a fair amount of mockery redirected squarely at her. I tapped through it, once absorbing the tone. She had turned the camera on me without thought. Now the same platform she used for control was pulling the narrative out of her hands. Her laugh in the background was now a punchline. Her smirk, frozen mid-frame, had become a meme. "They're calling her out," Ellison added, trying to spin it. Said she was just playing along, didn't know it was real. I nodded, but said nothing. The situation report loaded on my terminal. The breach we'd been tracking had routed itself through a civilian network 2 weeks earlier, encrypted traffic jumping through proxies in California, Ohio, and Northern Virginia. One of the IP flags landed squarely in our cul-de-sac. They used an influencer cluster to mask traffic, the tech officer explained. Routine product placements, #churn, auto-sync video loops, all perfect camouflage. The command room dimmed as the projection map updated. Sierra's name wasn't mentioned directly, but 2 of her affiliates had been tagged in prior phishing campaigns. I scrolled through the details with a trained eye, isolating the activity from noise. Her WorldSoft edits, sponsored skincare lifestyle blur, had been turned into a cloak for something far more precise. I authorized a deeper trace on the alias handles and handed the tablet back. It wasn't personal, but the irony sat sharp in my throat. Later that evening, while reviewing message logs, my secure line buzzed. One new text. No caller ID. Just a simple message: "I always knew you were important." It was from Callie. I paused, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I let the message sit. A second notification lit up my personal phone, Devon's number. The first time he'd called me in months. I didn't answer. He didn't leave a voicemail. Back on the screen, the data feed rolled forward. I turned the volume down on the media chatter. Too many voices trying to reframe what they'd ignored yesterday. It was always like this. Truth revealed too late becomes performance. But the work remained steady. A final ping came through from Ellison's terminal. "Ma'am," he said. "Glancing over, your next session starts in 7. I nodded and stood. The mission files waited. I had everything I needed. I didn't tell them I was coming. The school assembly invitation came through a forwarded email from Callie's teacher. No note from Devon. No message from Sierra. Just a line at the bottom. Callie will be presenting her project on female leadership. Family, welcome. I arrived 15 minutes early. No uniform, no insignia. Just a dark blazer and the same West Point ring I hadn't taken off since that night. The gym smelled like varnished floors and cafeteria steam. Kids in mismatched shoes sat cross-legged on the floor, while parents lined the back rows with their phones already up. I took a seat near the aisle, close enough to see Callie's poster board, resting on an easel beside the stage. The paper was wrinkled at the edges, hand-drawn letters across the top. My grandmother is a leader. Below were cut-out photos from printouts, none of them from social media, all found the old-fashioned way. One showed me standing beside an aircraft blurred and backlit. Another was a drawn diagram of medals with labels like courage and service. Callie stepped up when her turn came. Voice clear, eyes focused. My grandmother taught me that leadership doesn't always mean being the loudest, she said. She didn't ask to be seen. She did the work. And I want to be like that. A small hush fell across the parents. When her part ended, the teacher offered me the microphone. I stood, slowly walked to the front. I looked at the rows of kids' faces tilted upward, bright with attention. Some uniforms, I said, are loud. Others are silent. Both protect. That was all. As I turned to step down, I caught sight of Sierra in the back of the gym. No camera in her hand. No forced smile, just watching. No words. Callie met me at the side door as the crowd shifted and clapped. She didn't say anything, just held my hand as we walked together out into the afternoon. The wind was soft, nothing like the storm from before, but it moved just enough to lift the corner of the poster she still carried in her other hand.